right, sorry. Gotta get my mindset. Today, okay. All right, so hopefully this is a little bit less awkward. The thing about recording on a phone is I want to look right at the middle, and I can't because the camera is either over here or over here. So I changed the angle, so we might be getting a very different angle of me today. So I hope you enjoy bare feet, because that's usually how these things go. Today's book, which is Homefront by Kristin is a bit out of my comfort zone. I picked it up because it involves a soldier who goes to Iraq, and I am writing about 9/11 myself. So naturally, I will pick up, or I'm drawn to books that revolve around the same subject matter. However, it was a bit grittier than I had expected. The novel revolves around a woman named Jolene, who is in the Army National Guard. She did not have a very happy home life growing up, and so as soon as she was able, she joined the Army, and that is where she met her best friend Tammy, and they fly Blackhawks, which if you don't know what that means that they fly helicopters. Also, if you don't know much about military service, you know that the National Guard is not active duty, so the deployment does come as something a surprise. Jolene is married to a man named Michael, who not only is he not a fan of the military, but he is going through his own issues, which means that the marriage is having issues. And right before the deployment, he tells her, I don't love you anymore, and I don't want to be married to you anymore. They have a 12-year-old daughter named Betsy, and then a 4-year-old named daughter, Lulu. Did I say a 4-year-old named 4-year-old? They have a 4-year-old daughter named Lulu. Obviously, the announcement of her deployment does not go over well. One, because Michael disagrees with it, and he doesn't understand why she has to go. But we also have Betsy, who is my least favorite character. And this is something when I was looking at reviews that a lot of people agreed with me in that Betsy was incredibly spoiled. And then Lulu did not feel like a normal 4-year-old. She felt, for me, really whiny and much younger than a 4-year-old. I grew up in a military household. And so I don't know if my perspective is why I had a really hard time understanding their reaction. And I guess it's also because my dad was active duty for most of my life. And so the responsibilities and expectations and the things that they do are different. Whereas I think Jolene and Tammy just went off maybe once a month to do training. My dad was gone a lot. And so having him gone was not a surprise. It was not hard to deal with. Well, I mean, it was, but it wasn't shocking. It wasn't like, oh, Daddy, don't leave me, you know? It was just part of life. And so the way that Betsy and Lulu reacted must have been because Michael was never home. Like, by this point, he was not really an active parent, not really an active member of their family. So everything revolved around Jolene. And so I guess I can understand, if we're going at it from this angle, that their severe reactions were, my mommy, my main caretaker, my favorite parent is going to leave. And then, at least for Betsy, understanding the danger of it all, being scared about it. But we'll come back to the kids later. We'll come back to the family later. Tammy and Jolene go off, and you just know, because Tammy is such an important part of Jolene's life, that something is going to happen to one of them. There's a little bit of foreshadowing where obviously Tammy, who has a husband and a son, says, if something happens to me, make sure you take care of them, which Jolene reciprocates. So you know something's going to happen. You just don't know to who. Spoiler alert, their helicopter is shot down. Jolene is the pilot at this point. She gets Tammy out, and Tammy's unconscious. They have 2 more guys in the back. And all of this is a little fuzzy to me. One of them is semi-conscious. The other one is obviously dead. Jolene is hurt as well. She's able to get Tammy out, but she can't get the others out before the helicopter explodes. And from my understanding, because I listened to this, so maybe if I read it, I could have gone back and understood it better. Somehow the other two guys got out, even though the one who was conscious seemed to have gone back out of consciousness. I'll get more into this later too. I just don't want to stay too long. So yeah, everybody gets out, but it turns out that Tammy she's unconscious. Like, she is in a coma for the next, if this is the midpoint, she's unconscious for the next half of the book. So basically for 1/4 of the book, we do not know what's going to happen to Tammy. Jolene gets taken to the hospital. She ends up losing, I'm not sure how much of her leg, maybe from the knee down. She becomes an amputee. That is hard for her. She's also, this is something I don't quite understand, she also had issues with her hand, although she does regain her movement and her control of her hand. She goes home and she's a changed person. And not only is she changed, but the family dynamics have changed, because with her gone, everything was up to Michael, who is a lawyer. So he is having to fit life, his family life, into his work life and balance that. And then on top of that, right before Jolene was deployed, he was assigned a case for a young soldier who had killed his wife. And that acts essentially as his turning point of the way that will get him to understand what Jolene is doing, what sacrifices she's making. She comes home. Obviously, the girls are excited to see her, but she's pretty jaded. She's pretty angry at life. She can't stand the loss of her leg. She feels guilty about piloting her crew into danger. And so we spend, not the next half of the book, we spend a good bit of time watching Jolene overcome these hurdles and accepting her new life and figuring out how to live with the changes that have happened to her. And also because while she'd been gone, Michael had come to the realization that he does still love her. However, she cannot accept this. So now we are also watching them do what they do as a couple. Are they going to come together? Are they going to break apart? And right at that moment where you think that everything is okay again, we learn that, spoiler alert, Tammy has died. And that sends Jolene into a tailspin. And then this obviously has some other consequences. End of the book, large spoilers. Michael, I don't really understand how law works. So the soldier, he is defended on the stance of PTSD. So he's not sentenced to first-degree murder, but second-degree manslaughter. In any case, Michael is successful in the defense of this guy's case. He's also successful in convincing Jolene that he wants to stay together. Their marriage becomes stronger than ever. Jolene, has heart-to-hearts with her kids to get them to understand what's going on. She is able to allow love in her life and to semi-accept the fact that Tammy is gone. And there we go. We're ending. And now I'm going to get to the good stuff. Betsy. I sort of like Betsy in that in some ways she felt like a typical pre-teen. I liked the drama and the tension she created. However, I thought she was extremely dramatic. And I thought she felt far older than 12 with her mood swings. She was, and this is something I don't understand, and maybe it's because I grew up in the military community, she was embarrassed that Jolene was in the military, because apparently that's not cool. This book, I think, takes place in 2007, and so maybe that period of time has something to do with the way that people felt about soldiers. But she was mortified that anybody would know that her mother was in the military. And then she was even more mortified to find out that her mother was going to be deployed, because that would be even more embarrassing. And So I didn't understand why that would be so embarrassing. Why either of that. Like, who cares that your parent is in the military? I don't understand why that would be a point of contention for a teenager or a preteen. But honestly, Betsy, all I wanted to do was just give her a good old-fashioned whooping, because nobody ever said, Betsy, shut your mouth. You have no idea what you're talking about. You are so privileged. You need to respect your elders. Because and I felt like she never really settled down as a character, because I could buy the mood swings at first. I could buy the drama at first. But I expected Betsy to, just like Michael, little by little, start to see what her mother was doing, how her mother was serving her country, the sacrifices her mother was making. Yes, okay, so Betsy doesn't like the fact that her mother is leaving. I get that. But can she not ever come to the realization that her mother has no choice? Like, her mother's doing this for her. Her mother's doing this because it's her job. Yet Betsy is always about Betsy. She never comes to that conclusion, to that point of no return, where she develops into a character you want to be in the same room with. Like, I thought maybe after Jolene was gone, we would see Betsy understanding how terrible her behavior was. And we would see her coming to terms with, beginning to understand what was really going on with what her mother was doing, and that maybe she would apologize, or maybe that when her mother came back, she'd be like, I am so glad you're home. I'm so sorry for the way I behaved. Thank you, or whatever. But no, what happens is as soon as Jolene gets home, as I said, she's an amputee. Therefore, when Betsy hits her leg, not only is Jolene just mad at the world, but it's quite painful. So yes, Jolene reacts in a way that was not extremely pretty, but it's like this furthered Betsy's conviction that her mother was a terrible person, and so she continues to treat her mother with disdain the entire book. One of the first times you meet Betsy is when Jolene is dropping her off at school, and apparently Betsy had a fit because of the day before she decided she needed a new backpack. So it's those little things, like, you can see, or you can get a better understanding as to what kind of person Betsy is, that she freaks out. Okay, so when Jolene is gone, and the first time that Michael has to wake the girls up for school, Michael is exceptionally self-centered himself. But so I can understand where he does have some blame in this. He goes to wake the girls up and then goes to the kitchen to do his own thing, never goes back to check on them, which means that Betsy wakes up late. Who gets the blame? Michael gets the blame. Betsy takes no responsibility for this whatsoever. And my thought is, do you not have an alarm in your room for the parent or the child? Like, the parent, why don't you give her an alarm? For the child, if your parent comes to wake you up, you wake up. And if you don't wake up, because hello, queen of sleep here. My mother had the worst time getting me up for school in the morning. If you're late because you decide I don't want to respond to my father's summons, why is that his fault and not yours? Okay, it's not his job to make sure you wake up. If you miss the bus, if you don't have time to take a shower, that's not his fault. That's your fault, because he came to get you up and you just didn't do it. So it's these little things over and over and over that she never grows out of. I could not stand her. As I said, I hoped she'd grow out of it. I hope she'd become a character that I like, that I could see where she started and where she ended up, but she never evolved. And Lulu, I can accept Lulu a little bit more because she is younger. However, and I don't know if this was writing or if this was just narration, Lulu was so annoying. She was such a baby. So my question is then, what purpose did she serve? Because I could, even though I don't think this was done successfully at all, I could see Betsy. I could see Betsy causing problems because she's a teenager. and she doesn't understand, and she's pushing back, and she's just being problematic, not understanding what was really going on, and then eventually understanding, which, as I said, never happened. But Lulu, somebody said in a review that they could understand Lulu's behavior or accept Lulu's behavior if maybe she had a mental disability, because that is how she comes off, because she feels so much younger and immature than a 4-year-old should be. And I just got really tired of her crying. Sorry. Yeah, I just got so tired. Like, honestly, she would cry because Betsy did something she didn't like. She would cry because Michael did something she didn't like. She cried because her mother did something she didn't like. She cried because she didn't get her way. She cried because of this. She cried before, and I was like, oh my gosh. Aren't little kids supposed to be happy-go-lucky? Or, I mean, I kind of liked at the beginning where this thing with these kitty ear headbands, and if she put them on, that meant she's invisible. So I could see bringing that into play because she's having a hard time adjusting to changes, and that's just the way she dealt with it by, you know, obviously putting these headbands on and just pretending she wasn't there. But that little headband shtick did not last very long. From the point that Jolene goes overseas to the point, well, to the rest of the book, I was like, what does Lulu add to this except for more drama? But let's talk about Michael for a minute. I saw some reviews that didn't really care for Michael, and I could see why. I liked him eventually. I didn't think that he or Jolene were nearly as boring or monotonous as some of these other reviewers saw them. But what I liked most was in the beginning, because as I said, we have dual narration. So we get Michael and we get Jolene. So we see the different perspectives that they have, where she sees an event one way and he sees it another. And so I liked that I could hate him until I was with him, and then I understood him, and then I thought she was really annoying until I was with her. So I liked how Hannah kept changing my opinion on them. It created a lot of great dynamic and interest for me. And then I liked seeing how he changed, how actually getting a look into her world gave him a better understanding as to what she was doing. But I do need to say, I don't know why they got together in the first place. It seemed to me it was all physical, because if he was so anti-military, I do not know how he thought he could marry her and get along with what she does, because he wanted in the beginning nothing to do with her military life. For her birthday, all she wanted was for him to come to this event with her at work. And he was staunchly opposed to it. So he got her this wildly expensive Cartier watch. Was it Cartier or Tiffany's? I think it was Tiffany's. Rather than just go to her party. And for me, I'm like, you can't put yourself aside for just an hour. It was, you know, he was really frustrating. In the end, I liked him. Yes, I thought that the way that Hannah kind of pushed them together, pulled them apart, was a really great dynamic. But fundamentally, I don't know why somebody, I mean, I know this is a book, okay? I do. But I don't understand why she would put someone together with someone else when their views are so different. Like, I mean, it's almost like religion, where, you know, it's one thing if neither one of you are necessarily active practitioners, so you can go about your lives and have no problems. Jolene was actively part of the military. Even if she wasn't active duty, it was something she went off to do every single month. So why did he think he could ever be with her? Any case, when he got this pro bono case, I knew exactly where we were headed from that point on. I knew that the defendant had shot his wife because of PTSD, even though we didn't know the guy was military. And then I knew that in pursuing this case and learning more about this guy and what PTSD meant, Michael was going to change his tune. So not that that was a bad thing. It was necessary, although some people thought that it was a bit stereotypical, a bit cliche. Whatever. It didn't bother me. I did like how, because I don't know if I liked it or not. So right before Jolene gets hurt, Michael emails her basically saying, I love you, I'm sorry, let's stick it out. She never gets the email, obviously. So when she wakes up at the hospital and he's there, it's almost like at this point they had switched perspectives, where now he wants to stay married, but because of lack of communication and the hurt that she had carried with her into war, she is now the one pushing him away and saying this is not going to work. So I really liked that, although it didn't actually last long. Like, he explains to her pretty quickly, I was wrong. However, she still has that hurt with her and the hurt of everything else and the anger of everything else. So yes, they continue to have that really sticky dynamic of, can we work through this? What he does to get her to see what he's trying to tell her is he brings her to court one day where he's going to give his opening statement, and she finally is like, oh, he understands what I went through, why I did it, and he actually does love me. I do like it because she, like Betsy, she needed a slap in the face. Although, yeah, I could see how it could be a bit cliche, but I'd like to see these reviewers try to write a book like this and do something that no one expects. It's harder than it sounds. Okay, so we're going to keep on talking about characters. Sorry. I've talked about Betsy, I've talked about Lulu, talked about Michael, now we're going to talk about Jolene. I'm not 100% on board with prologues. This book opened with a prologue in which Jolene was watching her drunken parents fight. They go off and I don't know if they die because they are drunk or just because they get into an accident, but yes, they die, and then that's kind of sets the tone for the kind of person that Jolene becomes. In the end, I did like having that prologue because it did continue to weave in and out of the story and become an important part, and I don't really know how Hannah could have woven it in any differently, but what I liked most about Jolene was, so because of this event, because of her upbringing in general, she was not a particularly emotional person. She knew how to tamp things down. And this was a problem for Michael because he would have liked a little bit more emotion from her, for her to just say what she's feeling rather than pretend like everything's okay. So we get almost not a happy-go-lucky outlook on life from her, but we get someone who's pretty positive going into war. Even though she's going into war with the understanding that her husband doesn't love her anymore, and that one child in particular is the world's biggest brat. And so she's trying to keep this brave face. And so what she does is she kind of sugarcoats things so that her family doesn't know the extent to which she would be involved in the war. She says, I'm not going to do anything active in the war. I'm just going to be flying VIPs here and there. But she does a whole lot more than that. And what I really liked is seeing how her attitude changed from one of optimism to one of apathy, in a sense. Like, she becomes desensitized because of everything that is constantly going on around her. What I liked about this whole sugarcoating thing was, I'm with it. Maybe with her husband, she could have been more honest, although with a husband who doesn't support you, why would you want to be honest? But as a child, I mean, my dad went off and was involved in things that nobody ever told me the truth about. And if they had told me the truth, it would have scared me senseless. So I don't understand why Betsy gets so upset with her mother for not frightening the tar out of her before she left for war, or for not being completely honest in her letters. Why would any 12-year-old want to know the real dangers that your parent is involved with? I mean, my mother, her dad was in Vietnam, and there were those moments where you were just so afraid that your parent was going to be in the list of the dead. You know, growing up in the shadow of 9/11, we had a whole lot more exposure to daily news reports. There is something so frightening about knowing that your loved one is there, and then every day we're hearing about the bad things that are happening. So why is somebody going to go off to war leaving that in her wake? Eventually, Jolene comes to see how maybe she shouldn't have been more honest about what she was going to be doing, which is what we're going to get into right now in a very offhand way, only because you're not in here and seeing how things are connecting. My biggest issue with this book has to do with Jolene's accident. So she's up in the air and she is realizing that they're going to undergo an assault. The Black Hawk goes down, and when she wakes up, she's like, what's going on? She blacks out again, and then she wakes up again, and she's like, gotta get us out of here. And this is something I'd already kind of gone over earlier. She gets Tammy out, but she cannot get back in time to get the other guys out. I don't remember if she realized they got out before she blacks out again, or if it wasn't until she got back, she woke up in the hospital. But in any case, my two questions, my big problems that I'm having with this novel is, if they were under enemy fire, how did they get rescued? I was thinking they were going to be POWs. So was it the other Black Hawk that was with them that rescued them? Because what they were, I don't know if it was a hero mission with when you go to pick up fallen soldiers. I think they were just on a mission to rescue trapped soldiers. So I don't know if it was that other Black Hawk with them, or if it was the soldiers that they were trying to save. Somehow they were rescued in the midst of enemy territory. And then, as I'd mentioned, there were the two guys in the back. When she woke up, like, you know, they go down, she blacks out, she wakes up, she blacks out, she wakes up, she sees the guys in the back. One is conscious to a certain point, but then you get the sense that he goes back into unconsciousness. So how in the world was he able to bring the other dude in the back out? And why was it that the other dude died almost on impact, whereas he was the only person in the entire helicopter who escaped unscathed? Because, as I said, Jolene ended up losing her, because I guess it was just the right side. Somehow the impact only affected the right side of her body. So she ended up losing part of her leg, and then she had no control of her right hand, which that was never actually explained as to what happened to her right hand. Tammy, who was on her left, yes. So Tammy, whichever side Tammy was on, I don't actually know which side of the helicopter you fly on. Whatever side Tammy was on, she suffered enough damage or harm that she was unconscious from that point to the end of the novel, or till she died. So then in the back, whichever side those guys are on, why was one, some kind of shot to the chest, some kind of shrapnel to the chest, and he died immediately. So how is it that the other guy didn't suffer at all? I don't understand the logistics of it all, and especially how they were saved in the midst of enemy fire. There was never ever an explanation, and for me, that was pretty important, because I gotta know how that happened. How did you survive when there were no good guys around? You know, if you were there to save the good guys, how could the good guys save you? How could somebody get there with enough time to save you before the enemies came to get you? I don't know. it continues to bother me, and so I'm going to say this is not a small issue. I felt like we needed a little bit of an explanation, and we never did. To me, what was most effective and kind of would bring me to tears every now and again was Tammy and watching everything she went through, because that was the crux of the novel. That's what I was most interested in. So I liked seeing her her evolution, going from not necessarily happy-go-lucky positivity, but she could see the good in things. But then over the course of being in Iraq, she just saw the futility of it all, where you're just trying to get through the day, how tired you become. I mean, my thought is, oh, flying helicopters would be so easy, but you see the danger in it, you see the monotony in it, you see the wearisome in it. And then watching her come home and have that identity crisis, because you don't realize how much having two legs helps you, how much easier life is by having two. Even where she only lost one leg, she still lost a part of herself. She didn't think she was as attractive, as desirable, as useful. Like, she could no longer fly helicopters, and that had been so integral to who she was for so long. And then, yeah, watching the determination of, like, because when she got home, she had a temporary prosthetic, but she couldn't walk around her home. She couldn't go upstairs. They had to make all these concessions. She couldn't even make breakfast. Like, she couldn't get back to her old self, to her old schedule. She couldn't take care of her kids the way she wanted to take care of them. Even though she had basically sworn off the drink because of her family history, she started drinking. She started taking pills. Like, all of these things just to get through her life. I thought that was really impactful, and it could just be me, because that's what I'm looking for my own writing, to really get a true sense of what it means to be a soldier and the impact of war. So I enjoyed seeing that progression and the hardships and the difficulties and just the guilt, because she didn't do anything wrong. She just happened to be flying the helicopter the day that it went down. Who knows if Tammy could have gotten him out of the way, but even the loss of that one soldier, because he was just so young. And so, I mean, like, you kind of knew he wasn't going to make it out, because she kept pointing out how optimistic he was, the kind of perspective he had on life, how kind of excited he was to be a soldier. So you sort of knew he wasn't going to make it, but still, it's an unnecessary loss. It's a tragedy that you wish didn't happen, because he had so much ahead of him. And I liked seeing the send-off of the soldiers, because there's a lot of people that don't like the war, that didn't like the war. No matter what your feelings on the matter are, these are still people who are sacrificing their lives, and to see them honored, it was emotional for me. I like this book. I'll recommend it with a trigger warning, because it might not be your type of content. A lot of people loved it. A couple people hated it. I found some things that I could have done without. I found things that weakened the novel, but on the whole, it was effective. It was one that I told my mother, you should read. It's one that I tell my dad, hey, you should read too. And I am interested to see their takes on it. Wherever you stand on the military line can have an effect on your opinion, because if you come from a military family, you're going to see things a certain way. If you come from a civilian background, you're going to see things a different way. I feel like right now I'm kind of in the middle. Grew up military, but I've been civilian for a while. Is this a book that you would like? What are some of your other favorite Kristin Hannah books? Is Firefly Lane something I should spend my time on? What are the ones that I should or shouldn't? Do you have other military books for me to check out? Or not military per se, 9/11 related books. Hope to see you soon. Hope you enjoyed this review, and I will talk to you later. Bye. Sorry, I've got something in my, what time is it? Okay, I have time. Oh, I hate when things get caught right here.